Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today and for meeting with our office a few weeks ago. Thanks for putting some time aside.
And I think we got you some follow-up information on that.
We got that yesterday. We still have a few more questions, though.
Sure.
And before I begin, I'd like to submit a letter for the record, ask for unanimous consent. This is a letter from Governor Henry McMaster, essentially stating his opposition to seismic air gun blasting and offshore drilling off the coast of South Carolina. And I submit that for the record. I assume, Mr. Secretary, that your office would take that in consideration when producing the next leasing plan, correct?
The letter?
A governor's support of banning offshore drilling?
Absolutely, it's a factor.
All right. And you all would take into consideration local mayors as well?
We've talked about that, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to know then. And in late March, District Court found that President Trump's attempt to undo offshore drilling protections in the Arctic and portions of the Atlantic was illegal. And then recently, you said you put the new 2019 to 2024 leasing plan, the one that included the entire Atlantic coast, on hold. Last week, I believe you said you're weighing your options, that you could proceed as if the case was decided incorrectly or as if it didn't exist. So I just want to be clear here today. There's no legal impediment to stop your office from developing the leasing plan, correct?
Well, I think there's no legal impediment to developing a leasing plan. There is a question about what the scope of that particular plan could be and what it could contain when you got to the point of finalization. So that's really the answer.
So there's no legal impediment to developing that plan. Is there a political one?
Well, there's not a political one from a politics point of view. Where we are with this plan is the draft proposed program was developed and went out for public comment, as you know. Got a lot of comment. BOEM had been working on it. We have this decision, and my looking at the decision is asking the following things. One, does it make sense to move forward now or wait and see how the...
Okay, Mr. Secretary, I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't have a lot of time. So my understanding, there's not a legal impediment to moving forward right now, is what you...
Well, there's a legal impediment to moving forward in a particular way that leads to a particular outcome. There is. I mean, the district court has laid out a paradigm that I fully suspect the Department of Justice will want to challenge, and I'll be trying to develop a plan while that's going on, and then the court will ultimately rule, and then I would have to deal with that, and then if I guessed wrong. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
So you don't want to have to go back and recorrect the leasing plan if the court finds it in violation, is that correct?
So I think that might be not a wise use of resources.
Right, okay, all right. And you're solicitor of the Department of the Interior at the end of the Bush administration, correct?
Correct.
And just before leaving office, the department put out a proposed 2010 to 2015 plan that includes sales in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, even though that area was blocked off by statute, correct?
That was a proposed plan, a draft proposed program.
Okay, so that was a proposed plan in violation of that statute, but in this case it's different, correct?
Oh, what's different is I have until 2022 to get a new plan in place. I have some time, and so I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do, and then I'll do it.
And you've had direct communications with the president and the White House about this, whether or not to move forward with the leasing plan or wait?
Well, I certainly have informed the White House that I'm in pause, and I'm consulting with the Department of Justice.
And what's been the president's response to that?
Well, I've not been told that I had to go any different direction.
Okay. And moving to seismic, you mentioned when we spoke that there's no connection legally between the leasing plan and the seismic air gun blasting.
I think that's right as a matter of law.
Okay, and your office is still processing seismic permits for the Atlantic Ocean right now, correct?
Well, actually, I think BOEM is processing.
Right.
And so I think we gave you some documentation that shows that I think we have up to 9 permits in various stages of processing.
And while you're saying they're independent of each other, I believe your Assistant Secretary Joe Bernhardt said to an industry gathering, quote, "I will tell you, we wouldn't work really hard to get the seismic permits out if it was an area that wasn't going to be available." So it sounds to me like they are directly involved.
Let me be very clear about that. I have a lot of respect for Joe Balash, but this is my decision.
All right, so you disagree with him there. That's good to know. And here's what I'm worried about. You have the next step of the plan, which has South Carolina and Florida directly in its crosshairs. And I think that this administration and your office recognizes it as electoral poison to put those on the map before the 2020 election. And the court case in the Arctic is a convenient excuse to wait until that election passes, but the people of South Carolina aren't going to be fooled by this. It's clear you have your marching orders. I have mine from the constituents in South Carolina. And that's why we've introduced H.R. 1941 to ban offshore drilling off the Atlantic and off the Pacific coast to make sure there are never any oil spills off our coastline. And that's what our intention to do. I would yield back.